everyone and welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we will be learning the line-by-line explanation of the poem Childhood by Markus Natan, followed by the exercise that we will be solving in the end. I will also be telling you about the poetic devices as they come. So please keep your pens ready and let's begin. In this poem, you'll observe that the poet is deeply pondering over the questions of his lost childhood. The poet has also identified different stages of his life that has influenced him to question the childhood notions and perceptions that he had. He talks about how the elders or the adults have preached of love and respect, but time and again they have proved their teachings wrong by being disrespectful themselves and having double standards. So, when I read the poem, it gave me an altogether different perspective and I could relate to what was going on in the head of the poet while he was writing the poem. And I could really relate it to my personal life as well. I kept on trying to understand the logic behind everything, and I guess this is something that is common in every youth nowadays. We all want to challenge the different thoughts around us based on our rational experience and beliefs. So, without further ado, let's move on to the first stanza. The first stanza goes as, "When did my childhood go? Was it the day I ceased to be 11? Was it the time I realized that hell and heaven could not be found in geography and therefore could not be? Was that the day?" The word go here means end. The word ceased means come to an end or stopped. The words could not be means does not exist. So let's take a look at the poetic devices used in the first stanza. The first poetic device used here is refrain, which is a group of phrase which is repeated in the poem. So if you notice, in the first line that goes as, "When did my childhood go?" and the last line that goes as, "Was that the day?" are being repeated in the second and the third stanza as well, hence representing the poetic device refrain. The second poetic device used here is antithesis, which is when two opposite words are used together in a sentence in a poem. An important thing to notice here is that antithesis is different from oxymoron. An oxymoron is a phrase that uses two contradictory or opposing terms, while an antithesis is a device that presents two contrasting ideas in a sentence but not in the same phrase. The example of antithesis in the first stanza is hell and heaven. The third poetic device used in the first stanza is alliteration, which is the occurrence of the same consonant sound at the beginning of two or more consecutive words given by the example the time in the third line. So let's take a look at the first stanza and try to understand what the poet is trying to say. The first stanza talks mainly about rationalism. Rationale could be equated to the word reason or logic behind any action. जब हम किसी चीज़ पे कोई एक्शन लेते हैं, it could be as simple as walking and as difficult as rocket science. If we are tying our shoelaces, we won't tie them individually. Rather, we'll tie them together because that makes sense. We use our rationale based on some logic or reason. So rationale is something that each one of us possesses. It could be same about certain things and it could also be unique to each and every individual. The poet here is deeply thinking and questioning about when was the exact time he lost his childhood. Was it the time he stopped being 11 and grew older? Or was it the time he realized that hell and heaven are not some place you can locate on a map or visit, that they do not exist in the sky or somewhere deep inside the earth? So, in the last line, that is, was that the day? Here, the poet is using exclamation mark to suggest that he might have lost his childhood when he gained this rational outlook through education, which made him question his faith and think rationally. So let's move on to the second stanza, which says, when did my childhood go? Was it the time I realized that adults were not all they seemed to be? They talked of love and preached of love, but did not act so lovingly. Was that the day? The word seemed here means appeared or looked, and the word preached means to give moral advice to someone. Let's take a look at the poetic devices used in the second stanza. The first poetic device used here is alliteration, used in the second line using the words the time. The second poetic device used here is enjambment, which is the continuation of a sentence without a pause beyond the end of a line, couplet or stanza, as represented by the second line that goes as, was it the time I realized that adults were not all they seemed to be? So, this is a complete sentence, but it has been used without a pause when we read the poem and is continuing in the second line as well, hence representing enjambment. The second stanza talks about hypocrisy, that is, the practice of claiming to have higher standards or more noble beliefs than is the case. Here, the poet is pondering about when his childhood got lost. Was it the time he realized that the adults who appeared to be loving and caring and preached or advised of being this way were actually pretending to be so morally righteous? They were, in fact, discourteous and were far away from loving, caring, or respecting one another. The poet has lost faith in the adults around him, whom he blindly trusted and took them for their word without a question. Their hypocrisy became evident with passing time. If you haven't noticed, this is the longest line in the poem, and it also represents that this was perhaps the biggest and harshest reality to accept for the poet. Quickly moving on to the third stanza, which goes as, when did my childhood go? Was it when I found my mind was really mine, to use whichever way I choose, producing thoughts that were not those of other people, but my own and mine alone? Was that the day? The poetic devices used in the third stanza are, first, alliteration given by the words whichever way, my mind, thoughts that. The second poetic device is inversion, which is when the subject word order is reversed. So, if you notice the third line that says, to use whichever way I choose, the subject word order is reversed. It should have been, I choose whichever way to use. Rather, it is, to use whichever way I choose. The third poetic device used here is assonance, which is a repetition of a vowel sound. An example of this poetic device is the fourth line, that is, producing thoughts that were not those of other people. So here, if you notice, the sound of the vowel O is repeated continuously in the entire line, hence representing assonance. The third stanza talks about individuality, that is, the quality or character of a person or thing that distinguishes them from others of the same kind, especially when strongly marked. As the poet grew up, he realized that his mind was unique and he could form his own opinions and thought processes and make his own decisions, whichever way he chose to. He gained a sense of individuality that set him free from all the thoughts, opinions, and beliefs of the people that he had been raised with. He realized that his thoughts were his and his alone, and no one could influence them. He also realized that this might have been the time he lost his innocence, that is, his childhood, completely. Moving on to the fourth and the last stanza, which goes as, "Where did my childhood go? It went to some forgotten place that's hidden in an infant's face. That's all I know." The word childhood here represents innocence. The words forgotten place refers to the long time ago, and the word infant means newborn. The poetic device used here is anaphora, which is repetition at the beginning of a sentence to create emphasis. As seen in the last two lines of the fourth stanza, that goes as, "That's hidden in an infant's face, that's all I know." So, the repetition of the word "that" is at the beginning of the sentence is used to create emphasis in the poem. So, in the final stanza, the poet is not thinking about when, rather, he is thinking about where his childhood went. The poet here claims that his childhood innocence is long lost, but it could be found in the face of an infant, that is, a newborn baby. It also suggests that the poet believes that his childhood has become nothing but a memory, and the time cannot come back. Hence, if you ever wish to go back and relive your childhood, you can live it through the innocence on an infant's face. That's all with the poem. Let's move on to the exercise at the back. The first question goes as, identify the stanza that talks of each of the following. So, you can identify individuality in the third stanza, where the poet has realized that he is capable of thinking independently and he did not rely on others' thoughts. His decisions were his and his only. Rationalism can be identified in the first stanza, where the poet realized that he lost his childhood when he gained his rational outlook through education, which made him question his faith and think rationally, logically, and reasonably. Hypocrisy can be identified through the second stanza, where the poet has realized that the very adults who once preached of love and respect were in fact discourteous and far away from loving and caring or respecting any individual. The second question goes as, what according to the poem is involved in the process of growing up? So, when a person with passing time gains knowledge and education, he develops a rational, logical outlook towards life and is able to maintain individual thoughts. Therefore, he is assumed to be a grown-up. The third question goes as, what is the poet's feeling towards childhood? So, the poet feels that childhood is a phase which is full of innocence. In this phase, a child is neither a hypocrite or manipulative. He is free from all the wrong habits that are now found in adults. Hence, if you ever wish to relive the childhood memories, you can live it through the innocent face of an infant. The fourth question goes as, what do you think are the most poetic lines? Why? So, the most poetic lines in the poem are, where did my childhood go? It went to some forgotten place. that's hidden in an infant's face. So these are the 3 lines from the last, that is the 4th stanza of the poem. These lines really beautifully explain what most of us, like being adults, we feel. So these lines take us back to our childhood memories. So the poet here knows a newborn baby is free of any prejudices, any anger, any hypocrisy. He is pure, he is innocent, and he loves and cares for everybody equally. Hence, these lines are extremely important and are the most poetic lines in the poem. Thanks for watching. Hit like and subscribe for more content.